Welcome to Global Media Stocks to Watch. I'm Michael Swido. I'm speaking today with Giulio Bonifacio. He's the executive chairman of Alta Copper, which is focused on a huge copper project in Peru. More about that in just a moment. But first, Giulio, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Michael.
All right, as I mentioned in the lead, you've got a massive copper project that you're working on. It's located about 6 hours from the coast of Peru, up in the Andes. It's in a place called Cañariaco. It's home to one of the world's largest high-grade copper deposits that is yet to be developed and which is not yet owned by a major mining company. That's quite a feat. It's also worth pointing out that copper is a hot commodity. While it's trading off its recent peak of a couple years ago, copper prices have been rising recently, and demand is likely to drive prices even higher, as copper is needed for electric vehicle batteries, solar panels, wind turbines, and well, just about anything digital or electric. All right, so taking a look at Alta Copper's project in the Andes, tell us, what do your latest modeling and economic assessments show in terms of how much the project could be worth?
Well, there was a previous preliminary economic assessment that was published. The results were published in 2002, and that looked at a staged operation, lower capex on the front end, lower capital, initial project capital, about $1 billion, expanding from 40,000 tons per day to 80,000 tons per day. And it came in at a net present value after tax at over $1 billion. And clearly, as you ratchet the copper price higher, we ultimately do believe copper prices trade higher here in the coming years and months, for that matter. The returns are very substantial. With that said, we are going to publish by the end of the first quarter. It may trickle to the beginning of April, an optimized preliminary economic assessment that looks at the larger operation. So instead of operating at 40,000 tons per day and going to 80,000 and producing close to 200 million pounds of copper per year, looking at processing, because of the soft rock index, we're able to process with one SAG mill, 2 ball mills, and operate at 120,000 tonnes per day, which would allow us to produce north of 325 to 350 million pounds of copper per annum. Now, clearly, the more production of copper on the front end of the model improves the economics. So we fully expect the economics to be much more robust than what we've already put out. And now, to be very clear, what we've already put out is very significant, but it really demonstrates that it is a project that can produce for a substantial period of time at a rate that is of interest to a lot of the majors, including our major shareholder, Fortescue Metals. Clearly, if you can put a project into production that can produce north of 300 million pounds of copper per annum, that's going to drive a lot of interest. Can only at this stage comment that those results will be forthcoming, and with what we see to date, we're very, very pleased with the results.
There are a lot of numbers there, but I'll tell you the one that stuck in my ear was $1 billion. $1 billion. I mean, that is a lot of money for one project, so that is really something. I'd like to add that at today's copper prices, you're looking at a payback period of about 6 to 7 years for the project, an internal rate of return of some 17 to 18%. But the market for copper is tight, and it looks like prices are headed higher. So it would seem to me, as you were saying, perhaps what I just shared are conservative estimates. Is that fair to say?
Oh, that's fair to say. I mean, it's priced at $3.50 per pound of copper. As the copper price goes higher, that payback period comes down significantly. But I would add that with what's coming with the updated optimized preliminary economic assessment, you'll find that the net present value will be substantially higher and the payback period will be shorter. Again, it's what you do on the front end of the model. The initial project capital to take the project into production will increase, but by way of producing twice the amount of copper on a year-to-year basis with an operating cost that's very, very low from a comparable standpoint to other developers, you'll find that what we put forth will show a greater NPV, shorter payback period, even at $3.50 copper. But of course, on all copper projects, inclusive of ours, as that copper price goes higher, the payback period will clearly reduce. And you can see by way of our materials that, at $4.50 copper, $5 copper, which, some suggest we'll get there. That's a different discussion in terms of prognosis and forecasting. But, if clearly copper went to those levels, the returns would increase substantially and the payback period would be reduced significantly.
Well, you mentioned $4.50 or $5 copper. Citibank is putting an estimate even higher than that. It thinks copper prices will go up 75% or so from where they are now. I believe to about $15,000 US per ton, which translates, I believe, into somewhere around $5.50 or $6 per pound.
Sorry, Michael, if I could, not meaning to correct you on this, but at $15,000 per tonne, that equates to more like seven plus dollars per pound copper. So it's a significant difference. Yeah, but I mean, I think when you look at the supply deficit that's looming, you look at the EV thematic, decarbonization, these things will take time. Of course, that transition is underway. And you look at the declining grade profile, you look at production worldwide. It's safe to say that many do expect copper prices to trade in this range, but substantially higher in the coming years.
Okay. I mean, given all this, I think a question that has to be on a lot of analysts and investor minds right now is how close this project is to coming online. Your investor presentation mentions that mining could begin in the second or third quarter of the year. Given the permitting processes that you have to go through, how realistic is that?
Well, effectively, just by way of further background, to replicate a project like this would encroach a capital investment of close to $150 million US. So it's advanced. It's an advanced development project. But the next step for us is to move forward with a feasibility study. So the reality is at this stage, we're going to put out an economic study by way of that preliminary economic assessment that demonstrates what this project will look like. Funding permitted, start in on feasibility on Norte this year. That will start the permitting process for us. And we think that arguably with success, and Peru's opened up in a very significant way. They're pro-mining. I mean, it's been challenging for a number of years, but they've been very vocal about the fact that they want to move projects forward. And you can start seeing that by way of various approvals that have taken place. For us, the main focus in 2024 will be effectively get our drill permit in place, start drilling. We think it's substantially going to be a larger project. We'll speak to that shortly as to why. Put forth the economic study that I think will demonstrate the robust nature of the asset, but then start in on the permitting process. So, by way of execution, which is a key point here, and funding of the build, you could probably look at taking this project into production by 2028, 2029. So, there's a number of years ahead of us, but executing on permitting, executing on the project itself, I think drives us to a certain point of interest. And that's why we, do have significant interest from a very, very large shareholder currently.
And speaking about shareholding, I think it's quite interesting to note that your company, Alta Copper, it has a market valuation of about 30 million Canadian dollars, but the project in the Andes is expected to generate annual profits that are significantly above that level once the mining begins. So speaking of that, how do you propose to bring the copper out of the ground? Are you going to partner with a company that's bigger, or will Alta Copper do the mining directly?
By all means, I think in this case, a certain strategy is to focus in on our core competency, and that's, advancing the project, getting it permitted, moving forward with the community. And we've had good success at the community level to date over the last number of months. The project was clearly on care and maintenance. It's up until about 2022. So it's, hitting the reset and focusing on what we can do. But any project, any single asset company that has a project of this size really is seeking partnership with a major. We do have a $55 billion US company that owns 30% of Alta Copper called Fortescue Metals. They're clearly very interested. They want to move into the critical metal space. They're focusing on copper. We're having discussions with many, many other groups as well. But it is about partnering effectively and understanding very clearly that to build a project of this size, you need a team to execute. And that is not our skill set. Our skill set is really about defining the resource, advancing it. We think there's a lot more potential there with respects to growing the resource, but executing on all those other fronts and getting it ready for what ultimately allows us to partner with a larger company, or what you typically see in our space, a larger company coming in and acquiring companies like ours. I would say that when you look at the various other copper developers in our space, and some located in LATAM, some located in other parts of the American Southwest, I think we're well suited to be acquired because of the size of the project. And that reference point that you can look at producing more than 150,000 tonnes of copper plus 325 million pounds of copper per annum. That's a significant measure, and for us, it's more about how do we continue to advance the asset appropriately. But a long answer to your question, realistically, it's more about partnering with a larger company in some fashion, some form.
I understand that Alta Copper is working with community leaders and implementing sustainable development projects. So tell us more about how you're working to ensure good community relations.
Well, thank you for that question, Michael. I mean, dealing with the community and the stakeholders within the community, is a process that you manage. And so that'll be an ongoing effort for us. But we recently have opened up various community offices and several hamlets, employed some of the recent university graduates from the community. And a big part of that was, communicating with them exactly what our plans are on a go-forward basis, but also working with them relative to sustainable development. We put some funding in place for that effort. We've beefed up our community team, added some very strong individuals to help us with that process. And it really is more about involving them as a stakeholder in what we do on a go-forward basis and explaining to them in very clear terms that what we're going to do is ultimately going to benefit them as a community. And that communication is key, but it doesn't stop once you achieve a community agreement on exploration and extraction. It's an ongoing effort on our side. And so, now I think more so than ever in the recent year and a half since I've been here, there's a big push in that area. And it partly gets back to the fact that we're active again in the area. We've filed for a drill permit. Part of that was to hold a workshop with the community. We had over 300 members attend and explaining to them exactly what we're going to be doing on a go-forward basis. But, as I mentioned, it is an ongoing effort that doesn't stop. It will be a continual effort on our part, but explaining to them in very clear terms what we're going to do and how they can ultimately benefit from the ultimate mine that gets built at that location.
I want to take a look now at the investing side of the equation. Alta Copper's share price has been on a bit of a roller coaster ride. It's trading well off its recent peak set in January 2022. But investors who bought in 3 months ago, well, they're looking at a gain of about 15%. So tell us, why do you think the stock is rallying and why might now be the right time to invest in your company?
Well, I think you mentioned it earlier in the piece, Michael, that copper prices have come off slightly. I think across the board, all copper developers, including our company, lost value. But I think in part, the fact that we've demonstrated that we're moving forward in an aggressive fashion, both by way of an optimized preliminary economic assessment. We've made an application for a drill permit. We've already met with the community by way of a community workshop, and that went extremely well. So that's a positive sign. I think the change in Peru, some may consider to be pro-mining, but the change in leadership has really pointed to the fact that they want to push forward on various projects appropriately, streamline the permitting timeline, the regulatory timeline, and they've made that very, very clear in their messaging, which I think is a very key point. And then when you look at the market as a whole and you look at what copper is trading at today, which is a very healthy level, and what it could be trading at in the coming years, I think that's also driving interest. The reality, though, is on a project like ours, we've got fantastic economics. We've got work to do, but we've started to demonstrate in a very clear way to certain investors that have stepped into the story, stepped into Alta Copper, that there's a real opportunity here. I think the other key point from an investment perspective is, every financing we've done completed in 2023 was done at a significant premium to market. We also have a significant shareholder that's a $55 billion company that owns 30% of the company and been extremely supportive. They've added a board member that's on the execution side. That's a mine builder, if you will. I think that definitely points in the right direction. So when you look at any copper developer, the reality is many of them, if not all of them, aren't going to be building their projects. They're going to be looking for a partner of some type. We've already got a partner, but we're having those discussions with that shareholder as well as other groups. And so I think if anyone were to look at the valuation by way of the economics that we put forth, the ability to succeed on the project, and also communicating that here you have a project that hasn't been drilled since 2013, 85,000 meters, and it's already sitting on greater than 16 billion pounds of copper equivalent. That's very significant. And so, part and parcel, as I said earlier, is focusing on our core competencies, but included in that is, why wouldn't we go back and drill a project? It's open in many, many areas with respect to Cañariaco Norte. Cañariaco Sur had 15 drill holes and is already sitting on 2.2 billion pounds of copper. and Cabrera Verde, has yet to be drilled. So there's just a real good opportunity from a resource perspective. The economics are robust. Our resource is mostly in measured and indicated, so we can readily move that to a feasibility study, start the permitting process. So there's a lot of things that we're working on. Re-engaging with new investors, bringing in new investors to the story, I think is part of it, and that's why you've seen the share price increase slightly. But it's still, in all frankness, it's still well below the appropriate valuation on this. And I think that, when you look at the shareholding of the directors, officers, myself included, I stepped into the company recently. I'll continue to increase my position. I think there's just a great opportunity, and I do believe copper prices trade in a range, but frankly, I think they go a lot higher over a period of time, and projects like this will get acquired, and that's kind of the primary focus. Advance it, de-risk it, execute on our plan. Sometimes the plan takes you longer than you'd hope it to, want it to, but I think at the end of the day, it's really, 2024 for us will be a very attractive year, I think, for most investors as we execute, both by way of that major catalyst, the preliminary economic assessment, the upcoming community agreement, and certain other initiatives and strategies we have in place.
Well, Giulio, I keenly follow director deals, and I think it's really, it's quite bullish to hear you say that you plan on increasing your stake in the company. So when a top director, when a chairman like yourself says that I plan to buy more shares, that is a great vote of confidence. Thank you very much for joining us today. We've been speaking with Alta Copper Executive Chairman, Giulio Bonifacio, and you've been watching Global and Media Stocks to Watch. I'm Michael Suedo.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having us.
Okay. Thank you very much.